Okay, this is Alexandra Levy with the Atomic Heritage Foundation, and we're here on December 27th in Florida with Richard Renner. My first question is to please say your name and to spell it.
Okay, my name is Richard Renner, and Renner is spelled R-E-N-N-E-R. It's palindromic.
Can you tell us a little bit about where and when you were born?
I was born in Gettysburg after the battle, and that was in 19 oh, this is bad, isn't it? 1927.
So you grew up in Pennsylvania?
Yes, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I lived there until I was drafted into the Army, and I went to Los Alamos.
What year were you drafted?
At the end of World War II, 1944, and I was in the Army there from 44 until 1945.
In the Army at Los Alamos?
Excuse me, let me correct that, 1945 to 1946.
Okay. So did you go through basic training before you were sent to Los Alamos?
No. They decided that after we'd been there about 8 or 9 months, we should have some basic training because we were in the Army. And so for a couple of days we had feeble basic training.
So what was that like?
We get together and take guns apart and put them back together, and that's about it. Didn't amount to much.
So when you were drafted, was the war already over?
Yes, it was already over. It had been over for about a month or two.
So how did you find out that you were going to Los Alamos?
Well, what was interesting there is they gave us an Army classification tests. And I don't know these tests, but I understand that they're, in general, an intelligence test. Can you read and can you think these things through? And as a result, they used to find people for Los Alamos. They thought the best procedure was to use this intelligence test. They figured intelligent people, if they measured high, would be less of a security risk than anything else. And so if we had high scores on the test, then they sent us so we could be interviewed by a psychiatrist. And so the psychiatrist gave each of us a separate interview and asked us if we wanted to go into a base in the West, or if we didn't want to do that, we'd be at the mercy of the, he didn't put it this way, we'd be at the mercy of the Army's choice. So we had a choice to go to Los Alamos or don't. I had been working up until I was drafted, and I had hoped to hitchhike to New Mexico. And the only reason I didn't is that they extended my employment for another month, and so I went to the Army instead. I knew Army was going to happen, but I volunteered because for a week or two early induction.
Why did you want to hitchhike to New Mexico?
I had never been there. Everybody's heard of Santa Fe, and this was an opportunity to check it out. And that's why I would have gone there anyway, but I didn't. The Army took me.
Where had you been working up until you were drafted?
What was I working at? I was working on a number of things, but at the time I'd worked all summer at the canning factory, peas, beans, and tomatoes.
What was that like?
Well, I had many different jobs. I was sort of a warehouse foreman, and I also took off hot cans when they were busy, otherwise canning, and that's about what I did in the cannery. I'd worked there two and a half seasons. Summer, just summer.
And had you graduated high school when you were drafted?
Yeah, I was in high school, and I went when I wasn't in high school. I graduated from high school, and then along they gave me some work for another extra month or two, which I did not expect because the season had ended. And at that point, I then was drafted. And so we went to shipped to Fort Meade, along with my group turned out to be 25 different people, males, of course, all males, and we took the train. I think it took 2.5 days to get to Lamy, and from Lamy we took the bus up the hill. And if you recall, it's kind of an interesting bus ride, and it was much more interesting then, I guess, because it wasn't totally paved, and there was lots of outlooks that looked dangerous. And it was, what I thought was interesting is because the troops who were with me were also so quiet. They figured, what are we doing in this place? How do we get into this? Because they'd never been in the West.
Did you have any idea what Los Alamos was for?
Well, by that time the bomb had been dropped, but we did not have any advance idea what it was for, where we were going, that it was Los Alamos, the bomb base, but when we got there we found out.
How did they tell you that this is what the base was for?
Yeah, well, everything was secret. Why was it secret? Because this is where the bomb was made.
Was there a big emphasis on secrecy?
Oh yeah, sure. Everybody theoretically was very carefully investigated, classified, so that no one would know. And the interesting thing was for us, we were recruited for either as firefighters or policemen. And there was approximately 25 of us in the batch of these kinds of guys, mostly young high school graduates, but not totally high school. A lot were not graduates, actually, and some were a little bit older, but they're young people in general. And we were not really told anything, but when we got there, we found out that it was top secret. You get in big trouble. We were giving passes. You could not move from one part of the base to the other, except firemen could, because if it's an emergency, you don't check their background to make sure they're good security risk. You send them in to stop the fire, and that was the reason. So we were kind of unique as a group. I imagine the policemen were similar. They called them MPs, of course. I think they were similar too, in terms of their unique category. Everybody else, though, had, as far as I know, had controlled areas that they could go to and live in and work in. We didn't.
Were you part of the Special Engineer Detachment or just part of the military?
Well, we were part of the military, but they called us SEDs, Special Engineer Detachment. Yeah.
So how did you end up as a firefighter? Did you choose that?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. All I know is they got a load of 25 people, and after we got there, presumably they looked at our records and decided who was a good policeman and who was a good firefighter. And it turned out that I was a firefighter. I wasn't given any choice. I was told, you're a firefighter, here's your bed, here's your pole to get down to the engines, and that was it. And I started off that way at the main base in so-called downtown. They didn't call it that. It's called downtown Los Alamos. That was the main base. But I found out in about 2 weeks, they transferred me and a number of my buddies to the top secret station within Los Alamos, which later became Fire Station 2. It was also called S Site, which I noticed does not occur in most of the current stuff one is talking about Los Alamos.
Do you know what the S Site was for?
No, I knew what it was for, at least in theory. We could visit their assembly areas where they put the bombs together, sort of a final manufacturing place, although I've read some material that they had other uses too, and it may be they changed over time what they used it for. But that was very close to our, across the road literally, to our fire station. And you have the pictures of our fire station, and that was quite a large fire station for that particular area, and had a lot of staffing. That was about half of our staff lined up there by the trucks. And so that kept us busy sometimes, and other times not.
Why were there so many at that particular fire station? Was there an increased risk of fire at S Site?
Was there any chance of fire? Yeah. Well, one of the chances, perhaps the only one that I know of at the time, was they did implosion explosions. And that was, I guess, a mile or two from our base up in the woods. And an implosion, you know, was to generate the technique to implode and then get a bigger explosion. I don't pretend to understand it, and they didn't pretend to explain it to us either. It's just, we're going to have fire out there, go out there and stay at about 1,000 feet away. And when it glows off, if the bits of metal that get scattered around start fires, put them out.
So what did the explosions look like? Were they small? Were they large?
They're relatively small. Maybe, I really don't know, 200 feet off the ground. Sometimes larger. I only attended only about 6 or 7 of them, and never learned anything anytime about what was going on other than to stand by and put out the fires.
Did they ever cause a significant fire?
Oh yeah, yes, they caused quite a few little fires, and it made us feel very useful to go around and put them out. The trouble was that in New Mexico that year, I was told it was the year with the driest climate in 20 years. And as you know, Mexico is pretty dry to start with, and which made it particularly hazardous. And so we, excuse me, we did have quite a few fires. And but these fires were forest fires, you know, ignited by explosives that weren't particularly dangerous. They were simply causing burning. And that's what we did most of the time, but not all of the time. And we didn't do that all the time. We had big gaps when we didn't have anything special to do other than conduct inspections and that kind of thing to make sure that safety things were being observed. Now, if you're asking me if we did anything more exciting than that, if I could, I have a point I want to make that relates to other things, if I can make it, and that is that there was one significant fire at the end of my tour of duty after I'd gone, after I'd gotten out of service. And that was interesting because the history of it is interesting. Fire Station 2, which is where I was most of my time, was how should I put it? It was a nice isolated thing. We didn't worry about the rules. The main job was do a good job and don't let any fires get ahead of us, and keep your machinery properly maintained and equipped, and do an occasional inspection at F-site when you wanted to see what was going on, if they had any big bombs on hand. And they had some that were radioactive, and they were fenced off so nobody could touch them. And they were the large ones, like the ones that were dropped. But this is after the war now, so it's not a big secret like it might have been a couple of months earlier. But anyway, there's a history of changes of personnel. And at S-site, letter S site, we were kind of happy with the place because we were on 24 hours a day, off the next 24. And can you imagine, that gives you virtually every other day free. Okay, and so the guys did their work, and then here they had the whole thing to visit around and mess around and goof up or sleep or whatever. And that's what they did most of the time. They explored the base, explored the woods, and so forth. So it wasn't hard work, but it was important, like much military work is, to be ready in case of a big emergency, not to act like it's an emergency all the time, because that could kill you. But when we developed our forest fires later on in the season, when the woods really started to burn, not much by western forest fires, but here's a fire, and here's a fire, and here's one, and there's one, and you go out at night, and there's one, you know. That was a problem because we had to work hard doing our job there. When you have about maybe 6 inches underground, which is all dry tinder, pine straw, rotting pine straw, and you get it burning, how do you put it out? one of the problems was, you saw the old trucks we had, but the real trucks that were most useful were Jeeps, and they aren't even in my picture. But the Jeeps we used because when we're driving around putting fires out, you need something to go between the trees. And also, one of the mistakes that most of the firemen seemed to make when they were new, at least till they figured out what was going on, was they'd take a big tanker and squirt it and squirt it and squirt it and then go on. They'd cover a lot of territory, and by the time they covered the territory, this stuff was starting to burn all over again. Give it 15 minutes, it'll dry out, and there's a little bit of tinder, and it'll keep on burning. So what we figured out, I think, at least what I figured out, and I think most of my buddies did too, but not all of them, was that you have to do a lot of legwork, carry a little tank, go over here and squirt this one to death and get ready to squirt this one to death, but make sure you've got a good soak because they're going to be up again. And not only that, at night sometimes these things would pop up where we thought we'd done the job. Imagine driving a Jeep, or a bigger truck would be impossible, but driving a Jeep around to carry you water to squirt these things, and you got 15 of them around here in the next quarter of a mile. You know, that gets interesting. Even though you have 5 or 6 guys working at it, how do you manage it? So unless you're very thorough on each squirting, and that's tedious and not very exciting and not much fun, but it works. Unless you work like that, you're not going to ever put the fires out. They'll just keep burning and burning and burning. So that was that's our big technological invention, if you want to think of it in those terms. But that's mainly what we did. Forest fires were our quote, best fires, in that they gave us something to do, and it was fun, and we felt useful. But most of the time, we had a good bit of free time.
And what were you saying about the fire that happened after you had?
Oh, yes. I didn't want to talk about that, but it gets me into the organization, excuse me, of the fire department. I have no complaints with the fire department. The fire chief was a New York Irishman, fireman. Apparently had a lot of experience in New York, and on that basis, I guess he was recruited before we got there to serve this little city of Los Alamos. He had a nice fire station, and he ran it his way, and he had a nice daughter, which got the troops excited when they arrived and said, hey, this is something special. But obviously that's irrelevant to fighting the fire, I think. Anyway, I think I drifted from your question.
What happened that you said there was a fire after you had?
Yes, you're forcing me into that. So we continued happily at my little station, fire station number 2, S-Site fire station. And we did things our own way pretty much. There were some older men that made sure we didn't do anything really stupid, but there weren't very many of those. Most of us were new guys. Then about, I've been there a little less than a year. A new guy showed up. He had been a fireman for 2 years in Panama, and he'd done a lot of the stuff that we were doing here. But he was a fellow that had been well trained as a fireman. Unlike us, they never gave us much except introductory instructions and a lot of practice. We had a lot of experience, but we didn't have any real good training. But we did a pretty good job because we learned what worked and what didn't work. But he'd been trained to be an effective firefighter in Panama. And I won't mention his name because he's 10 years older than me, but he's probably still alive somewhere. And he was uptight. He had the answers to everything. And he looked down on the guys he worked with. They were inferior, inefficient, but they weren't inefficient, but he perceived them to be that way. And as a result, he wasn't very popular. So here we get a new guy who really knows what's going on in the firefighting business, and he's with us, and we're not really cooperating like we should. And it turns out that the chief probably was impressed by him too, the chief down at the main one, the Irishman. And as a result of that, he wound up appointing him as chief of Fire Station 2. Now, prior to that, I think Congress passed a law that if you were in the Army, or in the service, I suppose, and you wanted to get out, you could, if enough other people who were in the Army re-enlisted. So about the same time, I was out hustling my colleagues, my other fellow firemen, to re-enlist. And I think somewhere in your literature they got a couple $100 or something like that for re-enlisting for a relatively short period of time, and so that I can get out and go to college. And so I was known as a hustler for re-enlistment with those guys, but not me. And I think it turned out that, first of all, I'd said, I don't want to be fire chief. You know, although I really didn't want to be fire chief. I often organized the guys, but I didn't want to be fire chief. And so when the fire chief sensed that I was eager to get out, maybe he noticed that I was a candidate because he acted like it. Now, why did he act like that? I'm going to get back to it, I hope. Why did he act like that? When about a week after I arrived, when I was recruited, after I arrived at the main fire station, he asked me, along with an experienced truck driver, would I bring one of the new red fire trucks, red, not Army style, up from Lamy and up the hill to his station. Now, this was a sort of an honor, apparently. And I said, why pick me, an 18-year-old kid, you know, a draftee, one of the worst kind. I suspect that he looked at our Army records and he just picked a number of somebody who scored high. They never told me what I scored, but the guys that I worked with thought I scored hard, and that's why he picked me. I was a sort of an organizer, but I was not a fanatic or anything. So when I dropped out of the picture, you know, many months later, when this new guy comes on, the chief said, yeah, I want to solve this satellite problem and get somebody running that place more efficiently. And this guy from Panama, an American, but from Panama, would do the job. And it seemed like a good idea. Okay. Now, a lot of my friends enlisted, or re-enlisted, I should say. They liked the place. They were having fun. They weren't doing anything much except putting out fires, which is kind of fun if you're not threatened with your life. Signed up. Most nearly everybody re-signed up, except me and one or two other guys. And then I took leave, and I went I hitchhiked to Mexico City for a couple of weeks, and then I came back on my way to college, which was in Pennsylvania. I was from Pennsylvania, and so I came back, but I stopped at the station and to see my buddies and see what was going on and how things were. And the news they had was, have you heard about the fire? Apparently, the radium shack, by the way, where Greenglass worked, we visited him a couple of times. The radium shack across the road from the fire station, I was told, I really didn't look at it carefully, was burned to the ground. That ought to be embarrassing, you know, to a fire department. Why did it burn to the ground? According to my buddies, it burned to the ground because the fire chief of that station, not the main station, said, don't put hoses across the road. It's in the rules. Yeah. That's a good place to end the discussion of this subject, because I don't know what happened since. But that really shocked me. It shocked me.
That is pretty shocking.
Yeah. And now I'm trusting my friends what they said, but he no longer was in charge, so I don't even know if he's there, but because I wasn't there very long to check the facts. But anyway, that's what we did. You might ask, what did we do in our spare time? You're asking?
Yes, what did you do in your spare time?
Yeah, because it meant more to me than the fire thing. Okay, I was on 24, off 24. And I figured, well, I was interested in Santa Fe, not Los Alamos. And there was a bus several times a day, up and down the hill, about 40 miles in those days. It's closer now, but it's 40 miles in those days. In fact, I had a bike that I acquired and rode down there one time, just because I like to ride bikes. And it was later stolen. But anyway, so I went down and I went to Santa Fe High School and said, well, I want to go to college, but I have some deficiencies in mathematics. Could I take a course? But then I couldn't figure out a way how to get one day off and not miss a whole lot of classes. I mean, it didn't make sense. And I thought maybe there might have been some flexibility, but I didn't want to test that system because it was kind of sacred for firemen. What next could I do? I finally got a job in a 5 and 10. Teichert's 5 and 10, it was called. A Jewish guy originally from Las Vegas, New Mexico, had a chain of 3 small 5 and 10s in different cities. And so I dropped in there, and he hired me because Christmas was coming by that time. And it was just very timely. I didn't realize how timely that was, but he needed somebody to work stock. His stock was a mess. He couldn't find a lot of things that were saleable, and he had a lot of things that weren't saleable he couldn't get rid of. And so he hired me as a stockman every other day, okay? And my job was to essentially, a girl comes down in the basement and looking for this and looking for that, and I help her and get her what she wants if we have it, and say you don't have it, and that's it. That's all what I did. What was nice about that is that after I had worked there a couple of weeks, I got to know about 6 or 7 girls by name, girls and boys. There was one, a retired World War I veteran who'd been sent there, for he'd been gassed and wounded, and the only thing that would heal him was New Mexico. And here he was, healed. And so he was one that I knew too. They weren't all girls, but they were nice girls. Mostly high schools were part-timers, and then they had some full-time ladies that also did the work. So that was interesting because I had 2 years of Spanish in high school. I just finished one of them, and one of the years. So here's a chance to improve your Spanish, and I did. While New Mexico Spanish is pretty ancient Spanish, later when I got to college I found out it was ancient Spanish and doesn't do quite the job that the modern Spanish will do, but it was interesting to getting to know people. So that was one way I spent time. I also had Sundays. Sundays, for whatever reason, my 5 and 10 wasn't operating, and so what do? I go down to Del Rico Dairy and I help them make ice cream. And then what I do for my spare time, I think if you read that little passage, you'll find I go to boxing matches and roller skating. They had a wooden roller skating rink and so forth, and that's the routine stuff. And I went to cultural events. I even went to church on midnight, Misa de Gallo, and because I wanted to see what happened there in the cathedral, which is a nice cathedral actually. That was essentially what happened to half of my, not quite half, but half of my Army time, and that's what meant a lot to me. Remember, this is after the war. It wasn't an issue of let's kill more Japs. It was all over. And we were just sort of, I don't want to say it, but we were victims of the war since they had no use for us. But Congress never gets anything stopped on time. If it's a good thing or a bad thing, they just keep on and on and on spending money. And it was true then, but we didn't perceive it that way. We perceived that the machine was raking us up. And as a matter of fact, it may have saved my life. I say this because I've since met people who were not drafted at this time, but were held for later service. And Korea took care of them. Some of them died. So that's an interesting thing to think about.
A few follow-up questions. Did you, when you worked in the 5 and 10, did you have to wear your military
Yes,
uniform?
I didn't have to. I assumed I had to wear a uniform. I didn't have anything else to wear, but everybody did. But yes, in the 5 and 10, although normally I was not making appearances in public, although I didn't hide from anybody. Yeah, I was in uniform. I was in uniform the whole time until I hitchhiked to Mexico. And somehow I got my hands on some civilian clothes, and then when I got to Mexico City, I bought some extra Mexican clothes, or extra clothes to make me not look like a soldier. But I wasn't trying to hide or anything. My first ride I got was as a soldier in Mexico. Now, that brings up another little point about rides. I was hitchhiking then. Usually you depend on the bus service up to the hill. And one cold night, like some we've been having in Gainesville anyway, one cold night I was standing out at the road that goes up outside of town, and I got a lift in an Army car. And you know who that was, don't you? You don't. That was Groves.
General Groves gave you a
General
lift.
Groves and his buddy. I'm embarrassed with that. What's the other guy's name?
Oppenheimer?
Yes, thank you. You see what I mean about my memory? Yeah.
Did you talk about anything with them?
No, but they were very polite, and they just asked me what my outfit was and what I did, but they didn't really want to know. They were just being nice. And then they went on with their own chit-chat in the back seat.
Do you remember how they looked at all? I mean, General Groves was a pretty large man. Oppenheimer was skinny.
A substantial man, yes. Yeah. They looked like they were supposed to look. We've seen pictures of them, you know.
So you knew who they were when you got in the car with them?
Yes, I knew right away. Well, I didn't know right away, but to give a close look, who else could they be? this funny couple.
So were you kind of starstruck then?
No, I didn't try to start talking. I mean, come on. They picked me up because I was a uniform guy. It was a cold night. The bus had not yet come through, and they wanted to be nice to a veteran, and the war was over. The war was being over. It didn't really matter. I don't think it's an issue. That's all. They're just being nice. Did
you ever meet any of the other top scientists?
Well, the only guy was not a top scientist, Greenglass. He had his workshop directly across the road from the fire station number 2, which is where I spent most of my time. Some of my buddies on their free days roamed around and got to know people better than I did on the hill. And one of the guys they got to know was Greenglass. And so on one of the visits to his lab, two visits actually, I went along with my buddies to see what was going on. I didn't learn anything because I didn't understand what was going on anyway. Nor did they, but they were friendly. Now, Greenglass, you know, gets credit for ratting on his sister.
Ethel Rosenberg.
Yeah.
Were you surprised when you found out that he'd been a spy for the Soviet Union?
Was I surprised?
When you found out that he had been a spy for Russia?
No. I didn't know the guy really, except to talk to him a couple times, just casually. I didn't know he lived in Grove. But when I found out that his sister had been executed and his brother-in-law, I guess, I was in Peru. I read it in the newspapers. That's how I found out. Oh my God! Yeah, I didn't know the intricacies of that, what was going on, until I read about it later. Which brings up a question. I've done a lot of things later as a result of being to Los Alamos. For one thing, I went back there and got a job in what's these dates? 1949. Yes, 1949. It's the year before I got out of college. I worked at Summers. I worked for wall-bore fabricators, building apartments. And what did I do? I worked with Louis Hernandez and myself. We had a big bucket of mud that the wallboard workers needed to put their plastic on to make it finished. That's one concept. Pretty trivial, but there it is. Why did I go? Well, because I liked Los Alamos, I liked New Mexico, and I had a girlfriend too from Embudo. While I was there, I just ran into her. She's a nice girl. I didn't go back to the 5 and 10 though, because I don't think they hired me. But the Waldorf people played fairly well. So that was one I went back.
So you said you didn't get much training for the firefighting.
Yeah,
go back to that.
They did teach us things, but you know how to do this and that. But they routine maintenance for equipment and putting fires out.
So what was your first experience like? The first time you got a fire call?
Oh yeah. Yeah, my first experience was a lousy one because I was in fire station number 1, and the dorms were upstairs. And of course I wanted to make a good impression, but I was always a good sleeper. So bong, 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 you know, and it takes me a couple of minutes to realize this bong, bong, bong is not your kitchen. So I went to the pole and I went down, but I got there too late for my truck. The truck had already gone. So I learned to half asleep for a couple of months, or a couple of weeks rather, while I was there, because I got transferred from there to the other station where they didn't have a pole. They only had a less formal situation.
So what was the housing like there?
The housing for the fire station, it was good. For the fire stations, both of them were good. It was comfortable, plenty of adequate food. In fact, in Fire Station 2, we cooked our own food, as I can recall, most of the time. But I say most of the time because there was a sort of a, if I recall correctly, there was a little eating area at the other, at the rest of the other piece of our small station. Funny, I can't remember that. I only ate there a few times. Mostly the guys cooking their own meals on their own schedule. And nobody seemed to care as long as they showed up for their fires and then did their drills and so forth. It was not Army, if you know what I mean, but it was Army. We dressed Army, we ate Army, we got paid Army, 21, I think it was still 21 a month, you know. And so it was Army all the way, but the interesting thing is you have this civilian commander, and you also have the whole sector of the town was civilians of all kinds doing research and acting like civilians and living like civilians, and we are not in uniform mostly, but we're in uniform. We're Army. Interesting combination. I don't really know how many were Army, what proportion was Army when I was there and what wasn't, but it seemed to be roughly half and half, but that's a poor guess. Of course, you had to have your pass every time you went out off the post, and a pass to get in. We had that, all-purpose passes, you know, and it was taken very seriously while I was there. But of course, shortly after I left, I think they started to relax a lot of that stuff because there's so much public knowledge. But the serious, I thought it was funny that they thought that people who were so-called intelligent were better risks. They may be the worst kind. Look at the ones that got caught. They weren't intelligent enough. But that's a disturbing concept. But you know, but if you're a bureaucrat, you got to make some kind of decision, and so that was maybe is it better than the other side.
So did any other firefighters also have other jobs like you did, or were you unique in that?
If they did, I didn't know that. No, I think they could have. They didn't want to. Los Alamos was a place of protection. I hate to put it that way because they weren't scared. It's just, you know, we'd go out where all these people not talking English, you know. About half the population of Santa Fe was native language, was Spanish at that time. It's not anymore, it's changed a lot. But the interesting thing about Santa Fe Spanish is that in those days, even in those days, if you went to school for 7 or 8 years, you spoke better English as a Hispanic, as a second language, than a lot of the kids in my hometown could speak English. Simply because you only spoke English with educated people, and that was all you knew. Whereas your Spanish was for hillbilly Spanish, or ancient Spanish, maybe I should say. Sometimes it was very good Spanish too. It didn't have the stature. It did. So I think Hispanics, when they had to have it for the school, they handled English idiomatically very well. Yeah, I don't know if that touches your point, or maybe not. Yeah.
Did you want to work in Santa Fe partly to learn better Spanish?
Well, yeah, but that's what I did. I did it while I was in the Army, but I didn't. There's no money to be made in Santa Fe unless you're an independent businessman, and I figured that out. I did, though, along those lines. I did go back about 2 years ago or later and got a master's in Latin American Studies from the University of New Mexico, and I wrote it on Eva Perón, who died the day I finished my thesis. I didn't plan it that way.
Did you know any of the Pueblo Indians when you were in New Mexico?
And the Indians, Pueblo Indians?
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I did not. It disappointed me, but what can I do? I'm sure I talked to them in a plaza, you know, and that sort of thing, but that's not meeting them as persons.
Did you get to know any of the civilians at Los Alamos? Or
Yes, lots of them, sure. But mostly the girls and the guys that worked at the 5 and 10, and the guy who ran the creamery, and some of the guys in the restaurants, and Anita up at the Woolworths, who used to give me nice portions of Sundays.
So can you tell me a little bit about what did you end up doing after the war then? What kind of a career did you go into?
Career? Oh, that's a different thing. I was always interested in people who were a little bit different, meaning people of different cultures. But the only angle I had on it was the fact that I had Spanish in high school. And so I thought I'd better latch on to that, because I never had access to people who knew foreign languages in my hometown. Everybody spoke English. Nobody knew foreign language. But another thing that got me started was, and this is really off topic, but when I was 8 years old, Swiss, a butter company, canceled foreign stamps in their butter. If you're old enough, which you're not, you would remember that. Well, you mean people in the world that don't speak English? How could that be? So that fascinated me, because then I started to collect foreign stamps. So it created a lot of interest in different parts of the world. And then as a consequence of that, I did travel when I could. But when I went to college, I was practical. I majored in economics and Spanish. You major in something. And the trouble with that Spanish is good if you want to understand the old culture, but it isn't much good these days. And fluency did not concern them much, unfortunately, so I had to make my own fluency. Yeah, and my career? Well, so what do you do with a major in economics? Well, you want to get another degree, so I went to Albuquerque and picked up a master's degree in Latin American Studies. And then what do you do after you got that? Well, in those days, it was easy to get jobs. I had a whole lot of different jobs, but they were entry-level jobs, if you know what I mean. I learned a lot from them, but ultimately, you're not going to go anywhere that way. So I knew I needed another degree, and I liked teaching. I liked teaching adults. So I went to the University of Texas and majored in education, which seems like it's practical. It is practical, but a lot of people who practice it aren't practical.
So how did your experiences at Los Alamos affect your career?
Okay. My experience at Los Alamos, and I'm sort of stretching a point, my experience in Latin American affairs and not atomic affairs, if you forgive that switch, That's my connection.
So
It nurtured for the first time my chance to be to get people of a different ethnicity and a different language figure out how they worked.
so Los Alamos really opened your eyes, as it were, to different cultures.
Opened my eyes about what?
To different cultures. Los Alamos did.
Oh, yeah. Los Alamos really didn't do it. The opportunity to work in my off days.
In Santa Fe, that's what I meant. Santa Fe opened your eyes.
Essentially, that's it, yes. Yeah.
That's great.
And that's why I'm a little apologetic when I get into this business, because I had good science background in high school, but I wasn't interested in the science of it. I was interested in the chance to get to know another culture.
Well, and that's great that Santa Fe was able to help you on that path then. That's great that Santa Fe was able to help you on that path.
Oh, yeah.
To go back a little further, you had mentioned that when you were at Los Alamos, there were a few boxing matches that you saw. You saw some boxing matches.
Right.
Do you remember who was boxing, or?
I think Red Devil was the guy I remember. I saw 3 or 4, maybe more, just because of what else you do in a cold night and there's nothing to do and you have a little money. But I guess that's where I learned that boxing is acting. If you could throw a guy and he hits and doesn't kill him or cripple him, you've done a good job because you've entertained the audience. Now, I'm sure there's legitimate boxing too, and wrestling, but it seems a lot of it is sort of a skillful song and dance. At least it satisfied me and the crowd. The crowd more than me, perhaps, because they were supporting the bad guy, and you know, you play a role, you're the bad guy, somebody's got to be a bad guy, and then you turn into a good guy, and blah, blah, blah. It was a game, at least when we saw. It was not top quality, but I didn't know any kind of that sort of experience before anyhow, so it entertained me.
Are there any other social or recreational events that you can recall attending or participating?
No, just roller skating. I did quite a bit of that. That was fun. But I didn't do any tricks. You just go around in a circle and around.
Well, it's really great to know how firefighting played into Los Alamos, because that's not something we've ever had anyone talk about before.
Yeah.
You know, that's not something people ever think about, but of course New Mexico does have a lot of forest fires. So
Yeah,
it's good to know.
Yeah, I've read a number of things about Los Alamos. Not always with much interest, but because my daughter gave me. She works for the New York Times, and when some books come in that nobody's interested in, not just Los Alamos, but other things, she'll ship them down to me because she knows I'll read them sooner or later. And that's what I've done with Los Alamos. I enjoyed the one on housewives. Have I brought that up before? Maybe not. There's one that came out about a year ago or less about housewives and their role in Los Alamos during the war. And what pleased me about that is that it rang true about what I thought the women I had met there were thinking about. These are the women, the husbands, the wives and the husbands in their relationships.